We get through this, have it pretty quick.
Got it.
Onto, since the auditors, you may want to. Oh, they are that.
They are earlier,
Okay.
so
Do it after.
yeah.
Okay.
We
We should just.
Unless they're ready.
See ya.
Okay, great. So we are calling the meeting to order. And I'll start with roll call for the Finance Audit Committee. Let's see. Colleen Marshall, present. Great.
He's here too.
And Jeff.
Present.
Okay, great. And I am present, Elise Landry. Okay, and the next item is agenda review, which I think, I don't know if Adam or Greg wanted to say anything about the agenda, but.
Yeah, we may maybe check in with Savannah on screen to see if we maybe move the finance department updates after the auditors, if they're ready to go. But if they're not ready, maybe we would jump in on other stuff to let them go. So I don't know. Savannah, are you ready as is, or are you waiting for Josh?
Nope, Josh is unable to attend right now, but Ash and I are on, and Ash will be presenting the audit, and I believe we're all ready to go.
Okay, good. As soon as we get through the minutes, then maybe we'll just flop numbers 2 and we'll move 2 down below 3 and 4.
Sounds
That
good.
works. Okay, great.
Okay, great. So if it looks like we have the minutes for the November 1st meeting of the Finance Audit Committee. And so if everyone can just take a moment to review and see if there's any changes. I reviewed the packet online and I don't know that I saw anything, but.
Right. I concur. I didn't find anything.
Okay. Give you a moment to review if you need.
I think I'm good. I looked it over before it came,
Okay, great.
on top of it today. It's exactly the way you remember it happening, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, as presented.
Second.
Thank you. So we move to approve the November 1st meeting minutes, and then let's move on to the audit report.
Can we get a vote on that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Sammy. Yep. Yes, all to approve the motion to accept the minutes as is.
Aye.
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 Okay, doke.
All right, well, I'll go ahead and just kick it off really, really quickly and then turn it over to the stars of the show, the auditors. We thank you for first off, Adam Hanks. I've met, I think, most of you, but city administrator, 8th month, I think. So glad to be here. Glad to meet you all. I hadn't yet attended a finance audit committee meeting, so hit the other ones. The regularly scheduled meeting for finance audit, is in January. We had typically audits are due to the state by December 31st. The auditors will talk about kind of some of the reasoning for their workload that caused it to be a little bit later. More of a macro issue than a Coburg specific issue, but that caused a delay in meetings. So thank you all for kind of waiting patiently for the audit to be done, but we now have it completed. And in your packets, both the city audit and then the component unit, which is URA. And Savannah and Ash will step through the audit and answer any questions that you have, and then we'll hit all the other stuff on the agenda after they're done. But feel free. I don't know, Savannah can say whether it's best to ask questions as she goes or save them to the end. And but this is the opportunity that we have for the auditors, and we did invite council and budget committee as well. We're a little time crunched because of the delay in getting the audit done. So running it through a little more methodically through all the different committees wasn't really able to happen. So we're using this group as the spot for it, since it's in your bylaws to review it. Doesn't require the state doesn't require a local review, but I think it's in your bylaws and it makes great sense to have the auditors be able to answer any questions y'all have. So with that, I think we can turn it over to Savannah and Ash.
Hi, I'm Ash, and I have stepped in terms of Steve as he's on vacation. So I would just like to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to audit the city of Colbert. The audit went really well, and we are here to audit the financial statements and to see if there's any material misstatements. As for the city, the financial statements are presented fairly in all material aspects. In other terms, there are no material misstatements. Also, as an auditor, our other jobs are to test for the compliance of all the things that are on the back of the audit report. I'm not sure if you have a copy, but we also test for all the compliance. And part of the auditing is also to gain an understanding of the entity and also to understand what is going on, and to assess the risk of material misstatements. So we kind of focus on where there's a higher risk of those misstatements. We don't necessarily test on the internal controls, and we do not also issue a report on the internal controls. And also, this is not about finding a fraud, but if we do find something that we think that might be a fraud, we also look into it. But as for the city, we did not detect any fraud. Also, if you look at the financial statements, we do have the government-wide statement, which is basically reported on a full accrual basis. Basically, in accounting terms, we call it revenues are recognized when earned and expense are recognized when they're incurred. And for the government fund financial statements, those are on the modified accrual basis. Basically, it's a combination of cash and full accrual basis. So technically, revenues are recognized when they are both measurable and available. I mean, I can keep going on over the financial on the audit report, but do we have any questions that you would like to ask, or any question on the audit process?
I don't think so. I think we're good. Yes.
All right. I would just like to thank you for the opportunity one more time. And if there's any question that arises, please feel free to contact us.
Were you all interested in stepping through any particular sections and having them go through some areas? Or I don't know what has historically occurred. So maybe you guys could give us some guidance of what you're kind of looking for and hoping to hear.
Yeah, I do feel like in the past, we've had a summary of the audit from the auditors, and that would be great if that could happen.
When you say summary, are you just talking about the actual copy of the audit report, or is there a different summary report you're looking for?
Any highlights or issues that came up during the audit, or perhaps a discussion of the delay as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Savannah, do you want, I guess you could speak to the, what we talked about in our staff meeting about the delay on the couple months that happened with your workloads. And then I don't know, if there's any particular changes procedurally from last year. I guess maybe part of the reason this was a relatively straightforward audit. There's not a whole lot of kind of key corrections to be made, which is a good thing, but also makes it kind of a boring thing. Feel free, and maybe there's a follow-up. If we have a conversation through it, we can always send them information, send them questions after the fact too. But
I think, Adam, in lieu of actual problems, which fortunately that is always at a minimum or less. So I think it's more along the lines of top 5 things, so you are the group that pays attention to the audit in general on behalf of the city. And so here are the top 5 things that we wanted to mention regarding this year's audit. And so I'm giving language to it that we haven't given in the past, but that's and Elise is talking about a summary. That's essentially what we're talking about. I mean, we can actually read the report, but there's a reason that we're here and they're here. And so we're just kind of giving them the opportunity to communicate broadly, big paintbrush.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of the work was done by Savannah and Ash versus Josh, who may be able to speak to more of the detail. But Savannah, do you want to hit on the timing of the delays kind of from your end, just so we understand that part, and then we can maybe at least hit a couple of the, as Terry's mentioning, some of the, if you could quickly go over some of the highlights.
Yeah, so I'll have Ash go over the highlights, which the summary, which is also called the MD&A that we typically give you guys, is in the audit report. So I'll have her lead you to that certain page. But so as far as delay, I won't go into great detail about, so there were different requirements for GASB this year, which has to do with SBITAs. I don't know if you in the room are familiar with that, but it was a great deal of changes in requirement for all auditors. So it definitely delayed processes with, I mean, firms all across the country, for cities, for schools, smaller districts, not so much, because they don't have much in that way. Also, with all of the grant money from COVID starting to hopefully minimize, we have had triple, if not quadruple, the amount of single audits as far as even our cities, but mainly school districts. Those deadlines are typically March 31st, but schools lose funding a lot easier than a lot of people. So hopefully we know that for 23-24, at least half those single audits will drop, which means we will be more timely with our districts, with our cities, with our special districts. But between the new GASB requirements and these single audits, that is the cause for the delay. So as Adam has said, if any of you have, any questions throughout the year, after this meeting, he does have my information. I'm the communications manager for Umpqua Valley Financial. So I am his main communication, to say so, as far as, he's been in communication with Josh as well. But we are here to answer any questions you guys have, any problems you think there are, concerns, so on. But yeah, are there any questions to, piggyback onto the delay of the audit?
I have none.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, that what you say makes sense, Savannah, particularly about the single audit. I wasn't aware of the GASB requirements, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. And like I said, again, if you guys have any questions after this or future, I am always available. Adam can pass along my email or phone number. So yeah.
I would also probably add that when Savannah mentioned the single audit, we likely have a single audit of our own to do. Along with that, we're trying to figure out if there's 2 different pots of money that we have to determine whether we hit that threshold in this fiscal year, or if it's partial this and partial the next. It'll definitely be in the next year based on our water loan proceeds, and then also a kind of a jurisdictional transfer of funds in the street fund. If those are determined, if we haven't spent enough in that one to automatically trigger a single audit, but it's likely that we'll be doing a single audit as well because of the federal funds that we received or are in the process of receiving. The water loan we're doing drawdown disbursements on. And that is it's a state program, but federal funds. So we'll have a single audit as well. So unfortunately for us, we don't get to close the books on the audit and move on to budget totally. It lingers, and we'll be working with Savannah and Ash and team to do that in the coming months.
I just wanted to say, some of us have been through this process for a few years. And one of the things that is so nice to read is when they do their final statements, it's that there were no findings that needed to be addressed when, and I believe last year we had no findings. There was something that was a little bit amiss, but that was all corrected. And it's just really nice. Usually when I get this, I just kind of look for that summary page and their conclusion. It's like there were no findings. And okay, that's good. And then I go back and kind of look through things. And actually, I do read almost every page except for the PERS section. Because we were told that there's really nothing you can learn from that.
Yeah,
And I did want to just jump in real quick. I'm not sure if you guys found it or not, but that MD&A that I spoke of this summary should be on page 2 of the audit reports. If you guys are able to, if you have found it.
Thank you.
so Terry, I'm not sure that I have a great top 5 for you, other than we are creeping up in most categories. What the operating budget is, what our debt service is. So it's getting they're going up. There's nothing right or wrong about that. It's just slowly increasing the overall financial holdings and in and outs of the city are going up. I think in the future we'll have some conversations later, even tonight, about debt and about how things looking for future capital improvements and investment, but it isn't necessarily relating to to this prior year's audit. I came in on my first day of July 31st. So audit was kind of already going, and stayed, and we overlapped for the month primarily. So Ann and Greg could get the materials to the auditor. So I'm, much more familiar with it than when I started, but I didn't have too much hands-on with this audit, nor does a city administrator typically get too into it. The budget is more where I'm all the way in, and the audit is proving that we've done everything right, and that's a compliance piece to Greg's work. And I think every year that we go by, I think we'll get better at the audit, and hopefully also utilize a little more of their expertise on internal controls and on things beyond kind of the basic minimums that an audit is legally required to cover. So I hope incrementally to turn that dial, and use the audit to really, really poke hard at us and make sure that we're doing them right. We had maybe, I guess it's not really a top 5, but we did have a draft A. This was turned into draft B. That's now final. We had some conversations about how we label the movement between the URA and the wastewater fund. Are they transfers, or are they recognized as revenue and expense? Again, pretty innocuous, boring accounting talk for what category they are, but we did amend that in this draft B to show them not as a transfer. So there's those things incrementally that we go through that are worth debating, and sometimes we get we'll get educated no matter what, about what's the right best practice, and should we modify that. We'll talk again later about an audit next year may look a little bit different if we are changing, as we're hoping to and planning to, adding more funds, doing some different things to our chart of accounts, a cash controls fund, just some other things that might make the audit, the final audit look a little different. And I think hopefully improving how we track and treat our finances. But I can't think of really anything in particular that really would make an energetic, great social media post for a top 5.
Yeah. It's great. Like I said, I chose the language, former disc jockey and all this.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. Yeah, made me think. Yeah.
MDN highlight. Cities, so it's first bullet point, cities net position increased by 5.6%. And this is a result of the
So I'm just tracking where you are. Oh, one more. There we go. Yeah, well, maybe Ash, you could speak to what, the definition of capital assets, rather than, that's different than our, capital infrastructure spending. That's actually what we have. And I'd have to look at the detail that may or may not be in here. Well, as we put new things in the ground and as we do things, our assets increase, right? So those are everything we put forward. So next year, the asset category would increase by $1.3 million for the Public Works Operations building. So that would be another asset. So that'd be an example of one. So the work that's been kind of hot and heavy, and my guess would be it's on the water side of things. That's where most of our increase would have been, is projects that have turned into capital assets in the water fund for pipe that we put in the ground and the well and that kind of stuff.
Yes, you're correct. So are these currently in construction phase, or are these just going to be like buildings? Because when I'm looking at the assets that we have right now in the construction in progress, I think the current balance is like $217,000. Are you saying these are in construction in progress, or so the way it goes is, if it's currently in construction, we'll note it as a construction, and those do not get depreciated. Once the construction is completed, and then we go ahead and put that under, if it's a building or if it's infrastructure. I do see you do have infrastructure for like 3.3 million. So my question is, are these currently in construction in progress, as we call it?
Yeah, I think I was using an example. Yeah, some of them are. It was just an example of how our assets would increase over
Yes.
time. I don't know which projects would have already been completed and booked versus construction in progress. I don't have the list in front of me, but I think that's an example of how capital assets would increase. And then,
Yes.
of course, yeah, as they get old, like PBE and others, as they deteriorate, they get lower. Their value drops for our oldest assets. So the oldest stuff, if we're doing proper infrastructure planning and construction, the stuff that has a very low value eventually gets replaced by new infrastructure that has a high asset value. So some depreciate a year, but our new stuff should overtake that.
You got that right on point.
The infrastructure improvement water would be in this audit.
Yeah, if they were completed in this period, right? And then the other stuff is construction progress that will show later. But yeah, the general theory is the old stuff depreciates and gets less and less value. The new stuff pops in and kicks those old ones off, and it's got a higher value. So it's pretty natural. If you see audits from cities that aren't doing infrastructure upgrades, they would have a capital assets line that slowly decreases until they inject life-saving efforts to their infrastructure and build them back up.
So if on the audit report, if you look on page 37, you would see, let me know once you have located that page so I can walk you through this one real quick.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you could see that beginning balances, if you look at the total depreciable assets, is 3.5, and the total net value was 2.9 at the beginning of the year. And then if you look in the additions, we do have $26,000 in construction in progress. And then we did added $253,000 worth of equipment, and then 1.3 million for infrastructure. And then if you look, there will be a depreciation that's accumulated depreciation that get subtracted from the assets that being depreciated. So the total depreciation was $250,000. And then your total value of the capital assets were 1.3. But if you look at the balance, the ending balance, the total net value of the capital assets is 4.3 versus the beginning was 2.9.
Everybody find the page that,
No, what
it's
page?
page 48 of the packet.
Thank
and,
you.
Yeah, 7 on the.
Yeah, it's 37, it's page 37 of the audit document, but 48, page 48 of the packet.
Thank
And
you.
it just has in very summary,
Got it.
this is what they pull and summarize from all the information that Greg
Okay.
provides to them. I don't know relative to other cities of our size, if that capital assets, is a large number or a small number. I would suspect it's on the larger-ish side because cities our size might not have their own wastewater systems and all of that. So the fact that Coburg owns and operates both water and wastewater adds to that number.
That's
Makes sense to me too. Thank you.
Also, the one on page, if you look at the next page, that one is for the government funds. And if you look on the next page, on 38 of the audit report, you would see we have the assets for all the business type, as you were saying, the water, the water fund and all the business type activities. So we do have two schedules there.
The governmental, the first
then
page we looked
yeah.
at that one is primarily in general fund, it's parks. And then there's not as much typically in the general
No.
government
No.
as there are in the business. So water and wastewater and streets would end up over here on the next page.
Right.
If it matters, but. Yeah, I mean, the other part is if there's any things that aren't necessarily questions or just kind of educational pieces, we don't get to have them on the hook and on the line too often. So if there's something that comes up, just like, please explain how this is done. That's another opportunity.
right. I was gonna ask Savannah and Ash if there were any process notes about the audit process itself, anything new, sorry, I'm not sure if you heard my question.
No, were you talking about the audit process?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
So just the general information or,
Right, if there was anything of note, like, something changes in the process or
Anything new that we had to do this year that wasn't done prior years, that kind of thing? Is that what you're talking about?
right,
Yeah.
yes, yep. Or any-
no, I think basically we do have a really great process that in set, and then we kind of follow that every year, depending if we have any new audit standards. Like this year we had the GASB the lease and subscription. So that was the only one this year, but we kind of have a built-in set process, and I don't think we did note anything in particular, I would say. I mean, if we do feel there will be any changes, we will definitely let you know. But for this year, it went really well.
Thank you. Any other questions that are coming to anybody's mind about?
And again, if you do have questions later on, or if you'd like to get on a call some other time to understand once you go over the report, we will be glad to get on a call again.
Okay, well, we may be ready to move on. On the agenda unless anyone has anything further they'd like to add about the audit at this time.
We can, as Savannah said, if you all want to just send us any questions or give us a call, text, whatever, and say, hey, I forgot this or thought of something else, we'll compile it and then send them kind of a listing of questions, and then we can feed it back as we've got on later on the agenda. To get back on your regular meeting track is actually pretty soon. So next month. So if there are some, we can report right back on next month's meeting for y'all.
That sounds great. Thank you, Adam. Great. Well, thank you, Savannah and Ash.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we hope you guys have a good night.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
So I think next on the agenda, we're going to move up to item number 2, Finance Department updates. Is that?
Yeah. We're gonna tag team a little bit, but Greg will take the lead on that one, and I'll probably can't help myself and chime in a little.
Okay, great. So yeah, a few things that I wanted to go over. First of all, good to see everyone. Seems like it's been so long. We have been, let me make sure. Okay. We've been extremely busy here. We have spent a lot of time combing through our financial processes here. Everything from how we reconcile our books to simply doing our AP, to utility billing, you name it. We've been looking at it. We've been working on it. A few things worth noting here, and these items I am talking about here are in your packet. Few things that we've been doing. One big major thing that we've been doing is we've been working with a financial consultant. Now, this has been, it's been a great experience for me. And I think overall for the city, it's been wonderful in the sense that it's given us a total assessment of where we stand with our finances. Especially from a process standpoint or operational standpoint. So we went in and we brought it to council to approve working with this, to continue working with our financial consultants. Now everybody has this.
No, those are from council. Yeah, those are from a council packet. So that's not in your packet, but it's in a prior council packet.
Yeah, so nonetheless, working with this consultant, we have, we've talked a lot about our financial reporting and the information that we're reporting to you. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We'll look at one of the reports here, our February monthly report. We'll go over that a bit. Again, the idea of being efficient and using all the resources that we have at our fingertips and implementing our software that we have already, our Springbrook system. One major item that we're going to do here soon is we're going to convert our payroll system into Springbrook. So we currently outsource that. We're going to bring that in-house here. That's quite the undertaking. It will take some time to do, but we're really looking forward to doing that. That will give us, direct control over everything that we do when it comes to payroll, especially the reports that we're able to generate from our software. Again, the idea of being able to utilize Springbrook, which is our accounting software system, is just huge to us. Everything from PERS, which I'm not sure how much experience everybody has here dealing with PERS, but it can be very difficult and time consuming. This software, by doing our payroll in this software, allows us to link up with the PERS system and produce reports that are actually will integrate into their system, where now we pretty much do it manually. We're using spreadsheets where the chance of making errors is huge compared to what we're about to use. So
To jump in, maybe jump in real quick on the payroll. One thing that it's a common thing over the places I've been is when you say you're outsourcing payroll, really you're only outsourcing kind of the production part of payroll. You're never outsourcing payroll. Timesheet input, timesheet approval, all of your benefit administration, any accruals that you manage, all of that stuff. Only some of that ends up being in the hands of the third party processor. So they're processing payroll for us, and then sending some of the funds to the four major payroll related vendors, Department of Revenue, IRS, PERS. They send the checks. There's still a lot of reporting that has to happen that isn't outsourced. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison about outsourcing versus taking something in-house. And the value of in-house means that all of the accruals that we keep track of that are different between police and we have not too many. Luckily, we don't have a number of unions to keep track of different bargaining groups. That's a blessing to have everybody under generally one employee handbook. But there still is a bundle of keeping track of those things on individual spreadsheets, and they get messed up. They get interpreted differently. They get rules are not handled the same year to year. So implementing payroll within Springbrook also provides all that standardization. It's all built in. It integrates with our accounts payable, so we're automatically cutting checks or EFTing within our system instead of outside the system. Just all of it pulled together. So it's as Greg said, it'll be a substantial undertaking, but he will know behind the curtain of how all of the code setups are in Springbrook payroll and be able to then manage it moving forward, without the need of a whole lot of support from. And then on the employee side, it's all online. So there's an online portal for employee, pretty much. I mean, it's normal stuff. It's not new cutting edge stuff, but it's a big step forward. Everybody can pull their own check stubs for their tax season. They have access to all that stuff on their own. All of the timesheet entry happens online rather than paper. And so just a number, probably a dozen to 15 little things that add up to being really a substantial improvement for us once we get it all going.
Is there a timeline as to
Yeah.
that?
Council just approved the contract or authorized the contract. We submitted that. We've got, we have now rights established for it. We're on the docket for the scheduling for implementation, which we're hoping is in the May-June timeframe, likely to run parallel at least July, maybe July, August, and then kind of unplug the parallel stuff.
But a new module of Springbrook?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yep. We added on a module. So we're up to 6 modules now. So we're really the goal, is with any ERP is, you get the best bang when you use all the integrated products.
This module is new to us, but it is not new to them.
Correct. It is a pretty core setup. Most cities, I would say, that are, probably larger than us, would always have it as part of their core. When you get general ledger, payables, and payroll, that's usually what you buy coming into a package.
This group has a storied history of Springbrook, because depending upon who has been in or near Greg's chair, they've loved it or hated it. We needed to leave it behind, or we needed to re-embrace it.
I've heard some
I've
of
been
this.
hearing that for over a decade.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to hear these things.
Yeah, and I think Springbrook, just my short history, learning about their history, is they've really evolved over the last decade alone, where they were then as opposed to now. Different companies, especially the technical support side of it. I've heard some nightmares, but at this point, I can tell you my experience with it, especially when there's something we can't figure out or we need to call into Springbrook, has been excellent. They respond quickly, and I think they continue to evolve too. They want you to be successful.
Yeah.
It
I'm
is,
happy with it.
yeah, it isn't just the opinions of the people in the chairs, you know, it really is the product. And 15 years ago, they were a really solid product. I used them at a prior place for utility billing. We didn't use them for general ledger, but for fairly large utility billing, and they were quality, and they got sold, as is common in the tech world. And with, depending on who you sell to, they either double down on R&D or they squeeze the cash and get rid of it, you know, and starve it of R&D. And that's kind of what happened. They starved it of R&D and support. A lot of people bailed. Springbrook was really hurting. I think about 7 or 8 years ago, it was bought back by another entity, and a lot of money has been put into it. So they're really re-grabbing a lot of the market share they lost, and the products they've moved over to a new front end platform called Cirrus that really is pretty, I mean, I wouldn't say, again, not leading edge, but current. You can definitely tell that they've made investment to be a current player in probably the tier 2, tier 3 of government software. They have a hard time winning tier 2, but they're really strong in that kind of the tier 3, which is kind of our spot where we live here. So yeah, that's an exciting one. And really the other parts of Springbrook is really getting just better utilization of all of the modules. That's part of what we're working on internally. Utility billing, adding our backflow and cross connection device program into Springbrook to control, again, rather than an outside spreadsheet, will give us a lot better regulatory control over of our water system. So our utility billing software actually accomplishes that for us. So that's being implemented. Hopefully you all saw and all signed up for online portal. That was another Springbrook. It was very small add-on that we did right after I got here that makes all of your utility billing information accessible. Logging in and get all your history and pay your bills, be e-bills and all that stuff. So leveraging the technology, when we talk budgets into the future, the whole goal is, where we can stay within the 18 FTE, and leveraging technology helps us get there.
And those small really does make a difference. Just tweak something a little bit by using the software that cuts hours off of.
Especially the repetitive monthly stuff. So
Yes,
yep.
for sure. And I think as far as budget, once we get some history in this system, will really be for the new budget will be really helpful.
Having that internal payroll really does help for workforce budgeting and planning. So that'll be good. And just to add on the financial consultant, we did, as you probably heard, we went pretty strong with that contract. I think it was 36 hours. It was 10 hours a week. So it was a substantial contract. We skinnied it down a little bit to move on. We got a lot done with its initial efforts, and then just took it to council last month to extend it and really have a project list in a work plan for that consultant. Now that we've got some of the kind of the basic mechanics, and we've talked about the financial report that we'll talk about later, being able to produce that and stay current was one of the objectives. Is the goal now is, and Greg's been hitting it, is be balanced and done with the 10th working day after the month ends. That's usually around the 15th, so 10th working day. So that's a target. We build our reconciliation processes to ensure that we can do that, and then we can provide that to council timely, and to you all, these reports much more timely. Freeing Greg up, as I told council, I want to get to the spot where I can free him up to do more of the stuff that we'll talk about here later in the agenda. Some of these bigger, long range revenue forecasting efforts and things like that. But do we have others on the? Those were the. Yeah, if we want, since we're already done with the audit, we can jump right into those financial reports. That's kind of an output of what Greg and Cindy have been working on.
and we've produced these. I mean, we've produced them now retroactively for the entire fiscal year, but we presented them to council starting in January. But once we got it all figured out, got the systems built, then it was easy to go backwards and recreate every month. But it starts on page 125 of the packet. I believe that's number one. Yeah.
These
So
were
this is-
super easy to read. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, that's the goal. That's super easy to read. Perfect. Yeah.
Actually, really nice. And the percentages of budget to actual, just right next to it there. It's like, oh, this is good.
Yes, and that in itself is great to hear, because that was one of our major goals, was to make this simple, to be able to read this, get what we need from it, and not get buried in the weeds. Now, how long it stays like this, I think will be up to you all. It'll, our circumstances when it comes to, what we're looking for and at that current period of time, but it sure would be nice to be able to have a report like this that we can give every single month. Everybody understands the information, and we get used to seeing it regularly.
And generally the layout, as you see, it's very, it has cash balance, fund balance at the beginning, and then it goes through funds. So the next few pages are all the funds, and then it's a department summary of expenditures by fund. So, but it's in a department format. And then as we talked with council, really one of the key areas that, we look at immediately when we do these is 135 is the budgetary compliance, is to make sure this matches exactly the budget resolution to the appropriation level that we are held to. So the budget process, you select, what level you're appropriating to within the budget, not line item, but major category. And this is the major category that we are mandated to have budgetary compliance. So if we are seeing ourselves go over, the earlier we know that, the more time we have to schedule a supplemental budget hearing with council and discuss how we're gonna address. A lot of times a supplemental is a good thing. It's like, oh, you got a grant that you didn't plan for. So a supplemental isn't like a slap on the wrist. It's not a problem. It's just, where do you allocate the expenditure and the revenue with the new information that you have? Sometimes the new information that you have is, oh man, we didn't budget for something that happened. And then it is a bummer, and you have to figure out, what does council want? Is it coming from contingencies, ending fund balance? Are we reducing a different expenditure to balance it? How are we going to rectify it? And so this page here gives us as early warning system as we have to make sure that we're never, ever gonna be out of compliance at the end of the year. We will not have a budget violation. This is one tool that helps us make sure we don't have a budget violation. So really, really happy we have this here for all the department head team to look at. So we as a leadership team look at this monthly, and really encouraging all of them to look at each other's budgets as well. So we all get, a little bit more well-rounded about how each of these touch each other.
Any questions or comments about it, or anything that you see that may be missing that you'd like to have added to it? Or
I was going to ask a question, Gregor and/or Adam, about the actual to budget that sections that have a pretty large discrepancy, like under the water fund, the administration department. I realize we're only, part of the way through the year.
Yep.
But we're, past halfway through the year. I'm looking at the budgetary compliance page that you talked about. I'm on page 135. Could you guys just talk a little bit about some of those biggies that are, kind of out of whack? Like under general fund, the administration is kind of right around where we might expect it to be as far as actual to budget. And I'm assuming that budget number is for the year as a whole, right? In the budget column?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. And then the actual is cumulative through February.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So great stuff. You had two or three things embedded in there, and I'll hit a couple. The water fund is a good one. And it also is something that we're gonna propose to the budget committee to change the appropriation level. Because within that, in administration department, includes both materials and services, which is kind of our operations and maintenance, and capital. And so we would like to split that out to give you all a better sense and ourselves a better sense. We know we can dig into Springbrook and parse it out, but in these reports, and I think we should appropriate also our capital and our materials and services separately. They're mushed. And so that's exactly why in here that money that is budgeted is the $4.6 million of projects that we won't get all done in this year anyway. But also it doesn't give it's council raised that same question. So people that are looking at these reports are reading them correctly and are saying that looks weird. I think we can, but we've kept it that way because that's how we're appropriated currently. So in July, you'll see that broken out, the materials and services and capital as separate line items. So that was one. Budgetary compliance, let me get to that. What isn't tracking? Yeah, water.
State fund is another one, administration department, but that one, it just intuitively makes a little more sense to me, but.
It's the same thing. It's capital and materials and services combined. And I would say in another, it's another great example for streets. We're actually probably going to end up over in materials and services because our seal coat and our crack seal programs are actually, they're not capital. They're preservation projects, so they're operations and maintenance. That came in much more expensive. We only had one bid, and the bid was high. We took it and did it anyway, which means that we're gonna be moving. That's the benefit for appropriating the way we did, is we don't have to do a supplemental, because we went over there. We're for a budgetary compliance, we're using capital to make that happen. I think we're better off to have those separate. So we explicitly then would come back and ask and say, we're over in streets, materials and services. What would council like to do? Would you like to take it from capital? Would you like to take it from contingency? Do you want to take it from any fund balance? And then we can have a discussion about what's the most prudent and appropriate one to make that transfer from. So it's another example of, I think, when we get to appropriations, what we should do. And when you look at money on hand, we also have, we on streets, we got a lot of money early because one of the grants was not a reimbursement. We just got it first and we haven't done the project yet. So there are those quirks that show up. Some of our grants and loans are reimbursement based. So we expend the money and then 30, 60, sometimes 90 days later, we get the money back. Rarely, but sometimes we get the grant money up front and we get to bank it and hold on to it. Does that answer? Was there anything left over on that? Or is that?
Oh, that answered
Great.
my questions. Thank
Okay.
you.
Another thing to add, I guess, for these monthlies is, and Greg and I just met and talked about it this afternoon, is what we're planning to do is these are going to be provided to council and anyone else that wants them every month. We aren't going to really, unless questions come up or there's something really unique that we want to proactively highlight, we won't be talking about them a bunch, but we will be doing a little more expanded quarterly reports. And that's another thing, as Greg said, we would like to get, once we get a package together for what we think are good quarterly contents, we want to run it by you all and get your take on what is a quarterly. Quarterlies usually you can do a little more, and we will present those. So those would be kind of a proactive financial report to council with a little more trending, a little more, it'll be charts and graphs, more visual, just more summary about what's going on. We talked about a couple different, some topics. Obviously, general fund is always something that is educational and important to really track and understand because it's so tight. We'll probably do something in a graph format for budgetary compliance, probably have something that helps track, and give some sense of capital, since those are the big ticket items, how that capital is flowing. some debt summary work in the quarterlies. And then also trying to get, maybe on the breaking down general fund, really kind of making sure everybody understands the major revenues and major expenditures that drive it, kind of at a summary level, not at that more detailed accounting level. So we'll be looking for some guidance from you all as we put together the quarterlies.
Any other questions?
I do have one, and I think I know the answer, but back on the general fund, on the revenues that the franchise fees are at 13%. And is that because they just haven't caught up? They haven't been paid yet? And they will be coming in later on page 126 of our packet?
Yeah, I think you've actually identified a spot where the percentages, that's wrong. Because it looks like it's tracking, if you look at the actual math, that 13 is off, not.
Yeah, okay.
So we're at 140 and it's 280, so that's almost 50% exact.
Sure. Okay.
So
yeah,
I thank you. We will look at the percent formula on that one
okay.
and see what's up. I think Councillor Fox found one of those in another area at the council meeting that we somehow had a percentage mess up.
Licenses.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but franchise fees, I would say typically are one of are stable. That's one of the more
Sure.
stable ones out of what we have there quarterly. They're pretty fixed.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. So that's, you were right to question that. It just is, the percent is off, but it's tracking properly. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That's one thing.
Yeah, okay. It was one that Councillor Fox, that was the exact same line item.
Oh.
We somehow it rolled through and hit on February as well. Thought we fixed it. Okay, we will
We'll fix it.
make sure we get that one squared away.
Thank you.
Yep. That's why we need more eyes than just ours on it.
Hmm.
The way these are set up is they move straight from our reconciling process and auto dump into here. So while we're definitely open to, adding different things, we'll probably tell you how easy or hard adding different things is for us operationally. And that we'll do them, but I think it's handy to have that conversation and say, well, that one, hopefully it's really, really important because it's really hard for us to do, or really manual, or like, oh, sure, that's easy. So feel free to shoot them out there and we'll tell you what, how easily or more difficultly we can get to them.
I also really like the 1 page or 1.5 pages of the budgetary compliance, because it's just so compact and
That's really the most important page.
it
in the whole-
is,
in that.
And that your target is 66.67% because of the time of year, and you can kind of see how things are working. I like that.
Great.
And these reports are because of Springbrook?
No,
Or you
these are
just
not.
changed it?
These are not in Springbrook. These are kind of a result. I would say that I'd have to kind of say that these are reports I've kind of always read and always looked at. The financial consultant is someone who worked at former places I worked. So I've always read, I've always had our financial reports this way.
Okay.
So I brought her along to build these reports out this way here as well. So tried and true, that just took that format, working with Greg to get our reconciliation process into a spreadsheet format that makes this seamless and goes straight through. So it's it goes straight from GL to spreadsheet to here.
Yeah, and if I remember right, it seems like there were some comments maybe from council that they had asked for different things to be included or sort of combined in the reports and made simpler for them to understand also. I mean, we're all
We
just
have simple
citizens.
minds.
Yeah, we're none of it,
Yeah.
we're all just
Yeah.
volunteers.
Yeah, and really that's another part where the quarterlies can be a little bit more freeform than this, where we can kind of say that's because doing that every month is really challenging. But when we get to the quarterly stuff, we can probably go a little more, off script than the autofill kind of setup, but we'll take it from here. And we can pretty quickly build, and hopefully we'll have some set of those quarterlies also be reoccurring that we just update. They won't be fresh and different every time, but it does let us, do a little bit more highlighted analysis or, an educational piece. But the core of it would still plan, 75-80% of it would still be kind of the same, but more in a visual than this. And then we hope to have, kind of some rotating stuff that are highlighting based on current issues or requests from council or committees. Or just things that we think, hey, we haven't talked about that in a while, it'd be worth chatting about and worth displaying where we're at, or top 5, the top 5.
I'm not gonna live that down.
I like it.
Go with the top 10. What do you think?
Yeah.
Can we ask who the financial consultant is, or?
Oh, yeah. It's Cindy Hanks, who, full disclosure, is my wife. She spent 30 some years as the accounting and audit manager for the city of Ashland, and has been doing some consulting work for a couple jurisdictions. So we have that small contract and reports to Greg, and really is kind of the behind the curtain assist on the engine to get these things going.
Everyone knows her knowledge is it's incredible. So the help and education alone that I've gotten from her has been worth its time. So she is very good, very knowledgeable. So I don't think, knock on wood, I don't think there's a question I've asked or we've asked her that she hasn't been able to give us a response or answer to. Talking about someone that's done it for a long, long time. So.
And the goal is really, the contract is 8 hours, 1 day a week for a year. And we have a work plan, and we'll talk about that as we move on in the agenda here. But as was asked at council, the plan isn't ongoing. I think we will undoubtedly want some financial consulting expertise indefinitely into the future. We budget for it. But I think the next one, after we get these projects and get kind of our scope of work completed, we're probably guessing, thinking that there's some consultant services we might need for debt service. And that probably is our next one. And that's clearly not our current consultant. That's not her expertise. So hers is really operational expertise. She did the audit. Ashland's was a $170 million a year budget, and she actually wrote the MD&As and all that stuff for the city. So her audit experience, kind of that operational accounting functional stuff, is really what we're leaning on now. We feel we'll get that all accomplished in this next year with the assistance. And then as we do in all departments, we do have a line item for professional services, because we can't be experts in everything. But our financial, just as a heads up, that's not, I don't think that this will, I'm almost positive we won't need that after the fact. This will get Greg up to speed. It will get the systems up to speed, get us all set on a baseline, and then we'll have some different financial consulting that we may be proposing to council in the future.
So if I would just like to throw out this observation from my point of view, what we have, or what administration has within the city and council has looked at, is what do we really need external resources, external experts to provide, and what can we take in house? And so that's really, there's been a lot of effort gone on to, whether it's engineering or accounting or legal services, or so how are we fiscally responsible And how do we really get the biggest bang for our buck? And we know, as Adam said, we can't, our staff here and our volunteers, if you will, Colleen, cannot be the subject matter experts on everything. And we know we're going to have to use, but we're really trying to be judicious in who we use and how we use them, and making sure that we get what we're paying for, basically. So I just wanted to throw that out. I think there's been a lot of work done to be able to move that forward.
Okay, do you want us to just keep rolling onto
Sure.
the next
Yeah.
items? So the next item after the financial reports in the packet is just wanting you to be aware, especially because there are a number of items in this council goals document that specifically relate to finances, and I think we'll have a lot of involvement of this committee. So there's the staff report, and then behind the staff report is the goals and work plan, and we kind of through the council retreat, we tweaked it a little bit and went from a little more of a task oriented, action item oriented work plan to a little more kind of heading towards a strategic plan. This isn't quite a strategic plan, but that's kind of has the makings. I think we want to evolve the processes to a full strategic plan. So this document really lays out kind of the basis of our major workloads aside from our day-to-day, operations that we do. And I'd obviously love to get, hear any feedback you have on the whole thing, but the primary area that we wanted to be sure you saw it is page 144, which is the final set of 4 objectives in the framework under our financial resources. All 4 of these, we're really talking a lot tonight with you about number 1, the financial system training and utilization. That's been we've hit that probably, I don't know if we've gone overkill, but and I just barely touched on, debt service review and strategy. I think that's an important piece for us. Greg and I recently went through a review by S&P Global, who does our bond ratings, does our financial ratings, and we had to provide them a bunch of material and have a big, hour-long interview with them to see what do we look like? How good of a candidate are we for getting good debt? So I think longer term, that debt service review and strategy is a consultant, a small chunk of a consultant to help us say, we've got debt. We need to take on more debt in certain funds. What's an appropriate level of debt for us to get into, how much, how fast. We have some existing debt that I think in the next, depending on how the economy looks, it's now not a great time, but we want to be ready for when it is a great time to probably refinance a couple things. Some of that has been done, I think, in 21, which was a good. One of them was really, really well done. We have another that I think is due to be looked at and could be improved upon. I think it made sense for the time that it was dealt with as it was. There's nothing wrong with it, the decisions then. I just think we need to be ready on a refinancing, and then also for analysis of what kind of debt can we take on in our various, primarily enterprise funds, water, wastewater, streets, because you have to have enough revenue to make the debt payments. So that's a category that I think undoubtedly will involve this group. You've already had your fingerprints all over the number 3, the financial policies and procedures. That was ongoing before I got here. I just kind of watched it finish off as I started in on my work. I think there's some items in the document that you reviewed that were kind of placeholders of, hey, we want to get to some of these other things, and I think those were great. I agree with the ones that were in there that haven't gotten to yet, and that includes minimum ending fund balance targets, or having fund balance targets that are unique to each fund. So when we budget, we are budgeting to a minimum fund balance. The idea of a reserve fund, and then how you would trickle money into that reserve fund? What's the dedicated revenue stream to get there? I think that's an important conversation. And then, look at the pros and cons of kind of splitting the two components. I think there's value in ensuring that the financial policies are clearly done by resolution and are include some cash management policies, some things that are council approved and this committee recommended, and then some of the accounting procedures that really can change very frequently based on best practice and operations, that maybe those are referred to in the resolution but are not adopted by council. So they're able to be, they're a little more living document style. So some of those kind of things, I think that's just kind of the next round of the work that you already did, is coming back around to embedding those things and other things that you all may suggest. And then the fourth really is one that we'll need to, after this budget process, kind of figure out a plan to jump into, is that long-term revenue needs forecast. And that's primarily a general fund thing. It's not limited general fund, but that's primarily general fund. Is what, how do we adequately fund our general fund with the understanding that expenses are going like this and revenues are going like this? What do we do? Do we rectify the gap? Do we adjust our service levels to allow that gap to still be there? So this group, I think, would have some good involvement and recommendations that ultimately council has to wrestle with, and we need to figure it out. Like I said, that'll be in all the funds, but the enterprise funds, we already have a big head start because we have rate methodologies and rate design documents that help guide that. It's not as open-ended and as much variation as the general fund. So that's the framework document. And as I told council, we have a lot more work to do on this. We need to flesh that out. We need to break it into timelines. We need to put some costs associated with them so they can actually prioritize them, because this is way more than a 12-month thing. But it gives us kind of our I think, a really good overall roadmap. And most of what was in the last year's work plan in more of that action task format fits into, that was part of the exercise at the retreat, was, does everything that council is looking for, does it have a home? And, we ran through that exercise, and these are broad enough that they have a lot of things that can nest under them. So my paragraph or two describing them, there's a lot of other things that are floating out there that fit into these that aren't narratively described here yet, but we'll be fleshing all those out when we have some prioritization exercises with what we take on first, because we can't take it all in the same time and it can't get done in 1 year. So we got to figure out how to chop it up.
I just want to backtrack for 1 second, Adam, back to the number 3, the financial policies and procedures update.
Yeah.
The document that we've been reviewing, is there still a plan to split that document into 2 pieces? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, to have more of the accounting procedures really, not, be referenced in the financial policies of basically mandating that there is one, right? That's what you'd want in the resolution the council adopts, saying, there shall be an accounting procedures administrative policy document, and then we would run, I think that'd be a regular thing, that any changes would be great to come through this group, but not be embedded in that resolution itself. Just the policies would be in the resolution, and the other document would be a little more of a working document. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think it's pretty self-evident, but there might be a few things that are in the accounting procedures part that might make sense moving up, but mostly it's just a pretty clean separation between the two.
Great, thank you.
Want me to roll on into the CIP?
If no one has any questions about.
Okay. So this is a document that we had a work session with council on just last month. I think actually this month, the 5th. and will be, it is on the April 9th agenda for council to approve by resolution. The prior CIP was approved by resolution in 2022. So not much amendments in the way of the narrative that was in the 2022, just a little bit of maybe streamlining, but it was really quality content that was in that. So the bulk of the work is in the actual list of projects. And real quick for orientation, I'll step through the first set is by category, kind of by fund. And then the second set, which is called projects by fiscal year, that one clearly, it's all of the projects each year across all funds, just to see what the total capital spend for any given year might be. And then a third item of note is there is a total by in the first section, there's a total by fund or by major category. And then also the blue outlined boxes are intended to show the total per fiscal year by fund. That's the other. That one got a little quirky on everybody understanding that. Made perfect sense to me, but I was the one that made it. So, but it wasn't, I realized it wasn't, I didn't put a legend on there. So, but the goal was to say, okay, like the transportation one is the easiest to see. Looking at it's the very bottom one for 2024-25, that 1.7 million is the total of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 projects that are theoretically identified for fiscal year 24-25. The Brian Harmon, Public Works Director, and I presented this, and the big caveat is this is really optimistic. This assumes a number of things. It assumes that we have funding, which I think is not likely, but not way off. These are reasonable initial projections with some reasonable engineering cost escalation pricing. But that's generic. Though these are not these prices. These costs are have not been they're not design build costs. They're not 90% planned spec cost estimates. So they're general. They also may be challenging to do just from a project management workload basis to look at what can actually happen. So our next, after this hopefully is adopted by council, the next step in this is for the items that are in the first couple fiscal years. Those will get a whole lot more scrutiny in now because we're developing budget. And we'll also look at what portions of the project really will are design engineering costs and happen maybe in one fiscal year, and the actual construction component of the project happens in the next fiscal year. So this is really a bit simplistic because no project is shown to split fiscal years, which is physically impossible. They will all, and that changes then when a budgeting exercise, looking at just one of the transportation projects, Industrial Way 2-inch overlay. That one, if we had the design costs are between 20 and 30% of a project cost now. So design engineering is a heavy percentage. That would be 60 to 75,000 may happen in 24-25, and maybe part of the construction in 24-25, and part of the construction in 25-26, especially with paving. Summer is the time, so almost all transportation projects will split fiscal years. And this document is not granular enough to indicate that yet. So that's our goal for improvements to this document over time. But we felt it important to put what we think is out there in the various master plans and that are generically funded. I would say that the example, of course, for generically funded is the list of water projects that were thought to be able to be funded with that 4.6 million. And only half of those will end up being funded by that 4.6 million because of the project cost escalations over the last 2 years, just skyrocket. So we have to catch up to kind of what's real in the marketplace, as well as catching up to our optimistic goals as well. So there's a lot of forces at play that make this a constant juggle. We want to do these. We moved it from a 5-year to a 6-year, which brings up, I'll just throw a little teaser out there, brings up the idea of a biennial budgeting rather than annual budgeting. Concept I threw out at a council meeting. No decisions, no real discussion about that, other than an idea of, I've done biennial budgeting in prior places. I think it has a lot of value. It really has a lot of value in capital, because projects almost always extend over a 12-month period. And there's some kind of workload administrative advantages, but there's some other public policy community question marks on it. So we'll have a robust conversation about that. The upcoming budget is an annual budget, so that's for out. But I moved this to 6-year just to give us the opportunity to have 3 biennia in a plan. And we then also hope to have this adopted not in April as we're doing this year, but every year have an update done in December, January. So it's actually, while it's a fiscal year planning document, it will be updated basically on a calendar year. So then when we start in on budget, we have a real accurate and known and agreed upon basis. We still will for this, but it's really tight. I'd rather have that done. And then it's after the construction season as well. So we have a really good idea of projects in the November, December timeline. So we can update it when we have a pause from most of the actual work. So that's kind of the plan for the cadence of this, and how we utilize it. And hopefully it grows in detail. At least for the first 2 years, we get really detailed of those projects. The stuff 3 years out, 3 years plus, it's probably not worth parsing too much, because they're so subject to change in funding and in cost and prioritization. But that's the intention.
So this was just you and Brian that did all this?
Yeah. We had our engineering team just look it over for making sure our price estimates kind of logically make sense and where we are and things. But yeah, Julie had a couple comments, but no, this was Brian and I putting it together. And again, making it work in the budget that's the real magic. We'll see if that happens.
Sure.
Yeah.
So best estimates at this point.
Yeah.
As far they're out.
Best realistic, but likely optimistic, estimates. And in once, I think that's okay, because when we get to budgeting, the budget will only be what the budget can be, and then we adjust the CIP accordingly. So I think there just always need to be an acknowledgement that this document is not as rigid as we may want it to be. And the last item in the packet is just an FYI. That's just the monthly, last month. I think we give this to every committee, is in the packet, and feel free, if there's any questions, I'd love to have it. Kind of highlight the League of Oregon Cities document that's attached, the State of the Cities report. I think when you read it, you go, oh, that applies directly to us. Well, it applies to most cities in the state that are having this similar challenges, big or small. I just thought it was very good for us to see that it's not a uniquely us situation we're in.
Can I add on that State of the Cities, when it talked about the city cost drivers and they listed them 1 through 10, on the last page. Why is marijuana a cost driver? How does that drive up costs? I didn't understand that.
Policing?
Just the
public-
policing, oh, okay,
Yeah,
the
primarily
legal.
policing, yeah.
Right.
And the revenues associated with it,
Okay.
the tax revenues are really pale in comparison to the costs associated with it. And I would say probably people, when they do the next survey, it probably would replace, it's probably more of the Measure 110. It's more than just marijuana. But it's labeled as marijuana legalization, but I think it's probably the next go round, you'll see it be more broadly stated because it's huge cost drivers associated with that. And where I was, Southern Oregon, it's very focused in enforcement, not, this has general law enforcement and the grows, the grow sites and how to attack those and all that come with them, the building code issues, the toxic waste, DEQ issues, all the costs that go along with it's not the retail side of marijuana, it's the growing side of it.
I just wasn't thinking.
Yeah, no, it's good. Yeah.
Glad you asked that. That's a good point.
Yeah, contracting for helicopter work and all that stuff, it is spendy.
Yeah, you don't think of it as a city cost,
No,
but
I didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, in Southern Oregon, all cities will pay into kind of a regional task force that do just that. It's led by sheriff's office typically, and they really are very vocal in advocating for funding because that's who bears the brunt is really the county sheriffs.
Thank you.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the tax revenue came close to handling the costs, but drop in the bucket. And it doesn't go to
be
the,
a big thing though,
Yeah.
I thought they were supposed to be making a lot of money. Not.
yeah,
Somebody-
exactly. Exactly. Well, we threw a bunch of stuff at you. So that's what we get for being nice and waiting, for the audit to get done. We accumulated a bunch of stuff for you instead of doling it out every quarter.
Get to meet next month.
Yeah. So with perfect segue, are there particular things next month? I mean, we can talk in between meetings, but from an agenda prep, I'd be curious to hear what the group, we may not be able to make a bunch of headway on starting a bunch of new initiatives until budget season's done. But we definitely can get organized and get any Q&A done. We can do it formally. We can do it informally. If there's stuff you all want to see, let us know. And we can prepare an agenda that tries to get to it.
Well, I think this format is a great start because we'll have the quarterly
Yep.
financials to be able to review. So that's great through March. If you guys anticipate being able to have that,
Quarterlies are going to be the month after, right? So because we will just barely have the actual month done by the time we meet. And so then the May meeting will be when we present the quarterlies. We can probably, though, because we're generating kind of updating them. I think we can come in with a rough draft though, to you, at least kind of an outline of what we want to do. The numbers may not be include the final month's balance. But I think that'd be a good agenda topic to have you give us some feedback on what we're thinking for the quarterlies, if that works for you all.
yeah, typically, I think the finance, and you guys who've been here doing this for longer, correct me if I'm wrong. The finance audit committee meetings are scheduled quarterly to allow for review of the quarterly financial results. But,
Well, then maybe we should think about looking at the calendar and adjusting to make sure that stays the case. Because the way we're planning it, the 10th working day after the month is for the monthlies, which ends up being like mid-month. And then the way we were designing that is we have to get that month done, and then we develop the quarterlies for the following council. Yeah, we'll see. We'll look at that. We'll definitely bring. Quarterlies will be an agenda item, and we'll talk about them and get some content there, but we should also talk about kind of how that cadence is to make sure that we hit it right for y'all. Because it benefits us too to have it, to do a first run of them all here every quarter anyway. Tune us up for any problems that, so we give council the right product too. So I like that idea. I just need to make sure our timing works. We give ourselves enough time to do the quarterlies like we want, because we also want to add some narrative. I think they're just going to be a little more involved to pull together than just quickly taking financials and throw them into in a quarterly format.
Do we maybe need to talk about adjusting our meeting schedule? And I'm trying to remember what the normal cadence is, because I feel like,
It's normally, I think,
Obviously.
January, April.
so the
July,
month immediately following
yeah.
the end of quarter.
Yeah, that's what it
Yes.
looks like. And so the monthlies work fine for that schedule. And maybe even we just move it 1 week to where then are you doing the third Tuesdays?
We're doing the
Fourth.
fourth,
Yeah, we're the fourth.
Fourth.
fourth or last.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll talk to Sammy is who I lean on for all of that, or I can get myself
Us
in real
too.
trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else is going on at the same time? So yeah, let's look at that. We can at least talk about the cadence and making sure it's the right cadence that gets you all what you're needing and wanting to see, that makes sense.
But it would still be quarterly because that's what our bylaws say.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, just how we do the quarters. Yeah.
Mhm. Other ideas about what we'd like to see on the agenda next, or our next meeting?
Are we gonna work on the policies and procedures or just?
Right, yeah, that's
We
a
have a
good,
few more
that's a
pages to
good
go.
question, Colleen, because,
If-
yeah, and did
If you want to
we
continue.
decide if that was going to be a productive exercise at this point, if we're thinking of splitting those into two documents, or
We haven't completed
Okay.
the entire
Yeah.
document.
Right.
Okay.
But that, if there is other dividing work to be done, it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be completed either, because we already have realized that by the time we ended, it was time to go back to the beginning and start over, because we've been working at it for quite a while.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it really means, it really brings with it a requirement for us to have completed it, especially when the document that we're currently working on as a unit will cease to exist.
right?
Yeah, because we only have 2 pages left and it's cash receipts.
Mhm.
So
We could at least make it an agenda item to look at it and kind of familiarize ourselves with a game plan. We could,
Sounds
not committing to like we can jump in and do what we've talked about yet in the council framework stuff, but we can at least make sure we're all on the same page of where we left off and what's the smart next way to at least get that going again. And it might be in earnest starting it at the next quarter, but we should talk about it. We could definitely we'll include wherever what we have where you left off in the packet.
Sounds great.
Okay, good.
And then, if anyone has any audit questions after having a chance to go through this, is that something that we would maybe want to have a agenda item to discuss at the next meeting, or do we feel like that can be
We can cer-
addressed?
We could certainly be there and be very short.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good. So audit recap. And quarterlies
Yeah, that's all right.
and calendar schedule
This month. We'll see.
Yeah.
and then policies. Policies doc. Great. We can make an hour and a half out of that, no problem.
could even end early.
Have any other agenda suggestions before we?
No.
Okay. I think we are at the end of our agenda for tonight's meeting, and we can adjourn the meeting.